Hi, everyone. It's Steve Politi from NJ Advanced Media. This week's Rutgers Rant is brought to you by the New Brunswick Development Corporation. A big thank you to our sponsor and to all of our listeners for the continued support. Now let's get to the show.
From NJ.com and the Star Ledger, welcome to the Rutgers Rant, your one-stop podcast for the Scarlet Knights. With your host, Steve Politi, and Rutgers Insiders Keith Sargent and James Cratch. Let's start shopping.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Rant. Steve Politi here, joined by Keith Sargent, James Cratch, as always. And we're going to recap the Scarlet-White game. And I got to tell you guys, I watching Greg Schiano during that game, he seemed like he was having the best night of his life, right? He looked as relaxed as I've ever seen him in that stadium. He had the best offensive lineman in New Jersey who just committed to his program. We'll have a lot more on that later in the show. Then he watched this entertaining and mostly well-played scrimmage, the perfect night until Sarge gets on the post-game teleconference and asks him about going to a bowl game. And all of a sudden, you could just tell, like his back got tense. He looked like, he just like, come on, Sarge. He had this look on his face. That's a good question. He said when he did not mean it was a good question. That was awesome.
Yes, that's his go-to. Whenever he doesn't want to, and not unlike a lot of coaches, when he does not want to answer a question. Oh, that's a good question, Politi. That's a good question, Cratch.
You just dropped that turd right in the middle of his beautiful night. He's like, bowl game? Come on, Sarge. And then he didn't answer it. It was a good question. I was thinking it wasn't a good question. I'm just saying you ruined the man's night.
I probably phrased it wrong. I probably should have said, Greg, if I'm booking for late December, should I be booking for Detroit? Should I be booking for, somewhere
Pasadena?
down in Florida? Or Pasadena, maybe say December 27th through, January 1st.
Yeah. Overall, it was a fun night. It was good to be out of the house for starters. I know it wasn't the full attendance that you would have expected, but it seemed like, a glimpse back to normalcy, Cratch, and maybe more than that, the team looked pretty good.
They did. They looked deeper, stronger, more put together. They moved quicker, faster, more confidently. They definitely looked like a much improved football team. I just think the big question is going to be, getting back to what Sarge asked, does much improved mean more wins, specifically 3 more wins to get to that magic 6-win total and go to a bowl game? And when you look at the schedule, it's a normal season now. The element of surprise is kind of gone. You're adding Northwestern and Wisconsin to the slate. I still think it's going to be a hard road to get to 6 wins, but not out of the question because that looked like a much better football team on Thursday night.
All right, the thing we went into the game wanted to look at was, of course, the quarterback situation, Noah Vedral issue or starter. Beyond that, although I wrote the column saying finally there's not a quarterback controversy, and like the first 6 tweets were free Cole Snyder, of course, because Rutgers fans always love the guy behind the guy. What were your takeaways now? Yeah, you have some days to digest it. I think we all agreed in the press box that Cole Snyder looked like the more promising of the two, him and Evan Snyder of the two likely backups. That said, I did think Simon throws a really good ball. You can see that thing's got some pop coming out of his hand. Sarge, overall, what were your takeaways from that backup quarterback competition?
It definitely Cole Snyder impressed me a little bit more than Evan Simon. I go back to I think his first camp that he was here. Cole Snyder was this unheralded recruit who no one expected to play at all during his true freshman year, obviously. But I just remember when we actually were allowed to watch practice. Remember that, Cratch? Remember those days? I remember. I remember almost without fail every single practice. Cole Snyder would be like the last one off the field. I know it sounds like a cliche, but I remember going back to a boxer right afterward, and maybe an hour after football practice ended, Cole Snyder was still out there, throwing balls into the net. So the kid clearly has worked for it. We've talked about this before, but once they get on campus, the recruiting rankings go out the window as who works for it. And I think Cole Snyder's a kid who just based on my own eyes watching it from a couple of years back, and I'm assuming that it was a case all throughout spring camp. I think Cole Snyder really worked for it.
You had a great observation, Cratch, about timing the throws too. I mean, that's an important thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say I did the snap to snap, stopwatch off iPhone, off TV, which is not exactly perfect science, but the offense of the three scoring drives that Vedral, Snyder, and Simon led to start the game. Simon had the offense moving the quickest, the shortest amount of time, but from snap to snap. I thought, he's a guy who, remember, too, 2019, the spring game, when he was a true freshman, I believe, he had a big throw downfield, too, and kind of impressed people. He's a guy who, when he's gotten a chance to perform, has flashed, has shown something. Sarge is a really hard worker. I just thought Simon had some really good moments on Thursday, but he also had some bad throws. He threw a ball into the dirt. He missed a guy wide open down the field behind him. So I think that Cole Snyder definitely looked the part. My biggest takeaway from watching the quarterbacks was Johnny Langan. I think there's a reason why Schiano has several times now talked about the need for him to improve as a passer. I did not see that on Thursday night. I think Johnny Langan is who he is. He can do a lot of good things. I think being a Big Ten caliber precision passer like they want is not one of them. I'm starting to wonder if that means that his package kind of stays where it was, or they have to pull back a bit because they're not getting the downfield passing that they want from him.
Yeah, there was one moment in that game when Johnny was rolling out, and you could just tell. I mean, he's open, throw it. And he just didn't see it or wasn't comfortable making the throw into a tight window. That's going to be that's a big thing to watch, because I still think, and I don't know if you disagree, Sarge, I just still think if Noah Vedral gets hurt, A, it's a really bad thing for the team, and B, it's going to be Johnny. Johnny's going to be the guy.
Yeah, well, Johnny will be
straight away.
If it happens in game, exactly. Right. There's clearly a trust thing, and if you didn't believe that, it was in the season finale against Nebraska when they felt like they had a chance to win the game, they brought in Langan. It was Langan who they trusted in that spot. The other thing to keep in mind, and we've written this before, Sean Gleason, his based on history, going all the way back to Princeton, is a guy who clearly is not afraid to play multiple quarterbacks, not only during the course of a season, but in the course of a game. He's a guy who's played three quarterbacks in the course of a game. He clearly, did it last season, whether it was Sikowski and Vedral or, all three of them at times. So, if the competition's close, I'm saying that, I think we all believe that Vedral's going to be the starter, but I wouldn't put it past him to have, not only a package for Langan, but maybe a package for Cole Snyder if he continues to develop. Sean Gleason's a guy who is not afraid to play multiple quarterbacks.
All right. Other notable positions. The running game looked great no matter who was carrying the ball, Cratch. I came away. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. I mean, is that a sign that maybe the run defense that was a problem last year is still a problem? What do you think?
I think look, it's a spring game. They're not running, exotic stunts or fronts or everything. But yeah, I think you have to be concerned about that run defense because, look, Rutgers has some good running backs. I know they're very high in that group. Pacheco, obviously. I thought Jameer Wright-Collins, I know it's cliche to compare him to Brandon Jacobs, but I'm going to do it because that's what I was thinking when I'm watching him run. I thought Aaron Young getting a lot of work was interesting for me, but just because Aaron Young's a guy who's so versatile. He checks so many boxes that fit Sean Gleason's offense. But last year, it just felt like they never found the right rhythm or role or amount of touches for him. So I'm intrigued to see, obviously, Pacheco is going to have more than one carry when the game is, for real. I'm intrigued to see if they can continually get Aaron Young that work. Kyle Monaghan looks well. But no, I think the run defense is a major concern. It was an issue last season, as you mentioned. I mean, it cost them the Illinois game and it cost them the Michigan game. And I think now that, they really have to tamp that down going forward as they're going to go into this Big Ten slate, a true Big Ten slate where everyone's going to be prepared. Everyone's going to be on even footing.
Sarge, it was hard to get a read. I know, again, spring game offensive line looked okay. I mean, with a bunch of guys moving around, some guys not in there. Secondary, some switches in that position group. What other takeaways did you have?
Yeah, beyond that, just the playmakers. I mean, Isaiah Washington, pulls an Odell Beckham, with the one-handed grab down the sideline. He was a guy who 2 years ago, I thought, he's going to be a future star. That kind of regressed a year ago. I think he's going to be, a guy that, if he continues to develop like that, is going to be a serious playmaker. Beyond that, again, the running game I thought was really. I don't know if I go that far with Wright Collins as far as the Brandon Tate goes, but I do know Greg Schiano, based on his history during his first tenure, does like bulky backs. I mean, Jordan Brooks was a guy back early in his tenure that he gave a lot of carries to. Even going back to his old Penn State days, Greg Schiano has always liked having a big, meaty running back to give the ball to.
Tight ends, I thought
great.
Very impressed by the tight ends. I thought Haskins looked like he was, could make plays down the field, which is what they need. I thought Tajay Moore flashed. Victor Konopka looked the part of exactly what they need. A balanced tight end who can stick his nose into it and block and also make plays downfield. So I thought that was a position group. I've said it 1,000 times on this podcast. I thought it was one of the weaker position groups on the roster. I thought they needed to go get a transfer out of the portal. They didn't, but hey, I think there's some cautious optimism that that's going to pay off, and their young guys are ready to take a big step forward.
All right, I think we all can agree, though, the biggest development from the day was the commitment from Jacob Allen, the best offensive lineman in the state, the best player in the state. I think most recruiting rankings have him there. This recruiting class for 2022, it's incredible. Now it's number 7 overall in the 24/7 rankings, which is a slot behind Oklahoma and Penn State, and a slot ahead of Texas A&M and Texas. I mean, I don't know what could happen where this would not be the best recruiting class in Rutgers history based on rankings, unless it completely falls apart, and Greg Schiano's not going to let it completely fall apart. Cratch, give me a little bit about who this guy is and what the significance of getting him now is.
So I thought the significance was actually revealed the last question of Greg's Zoom call with us after the game. I think Bobby Darin at Scarlet Nation asked it. He was asked about the current offensive line, and Greg said, hey, it's no secret that was the biggest deficiency when we got here. And that really opened my eyes because, one, I believe we asked Greg, like, where do you need the most help? And he kind of, demurred, wouldn't answer it, we need help everywhere, blah, blah, blah. But the fact that he said that, to me, was a sign that he's confident that was the biggest issue, and now they've fixed it, and they fixed it in a big way by landing a guy like Jacob Allen, who checks all the boxes. They now have 5 offensive linemen in this 2022 class. So when Gavin Wimsatt gets to campus, he's already got a full line in front of him. And I think the statement of not only getting a 4-star offensive tackle, which is huge, but getting the top player in New Jersey, something that I believe – if I have the stat right, I think Rutgers only got 2 players in the top 5 in the state since they got Darius Hamilton, who was the last number 1 player in the state. So I think that's critical. And to go to the Hun school, they've never really had great success recruiting guys, getting guys out of Hun. I thought that was big as well. So no, this a tremendous kind of home run for them, get all the buzz to have it right before the spring game. But I think that's the big story, is that they put their focus at first in the defensive line, brought a lot of guys, recruits in, transfers, although some of those guys have since moved to the offensive line. Now they're really taking care of the offensive line, and they've got 2 4-stars coming in with Allen, and then the kid from Union City, Josiah Peterson in 2023. So they're really making moves, and that's where they will not go where they want to go until they have both offensive and defensive lines of Big Ten caliber with 2-3 guys at each spot.
Sarge, how the hell is he doing this? And I obviously when making the case to hire Greg Schiano back, this was number 1 on the list, that he's proven he could recruit there already in his first time around. But he's recruiting at a higher level than he did his first time around already, without the results really on the field to prove it. What's going on?
Yeah, I go back to, and I talked to him about it, early, during the pandemic. And the pandemic has not been good for anyone. Okay, so there in no world would if you
Jeff Bezos made $100 billion.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Some
fair.
people
Might be good.
But,
yeah, okay. But if you go back to March of 2020 and Time Machine, and Greg Schiano was given a choice of whether to have this happen, I'm sure he wouldn't. But all that being said, I think he's taken advantage of it in a lot of ways because he's very organized, and I think we've written countless stories on his CEO approach. He's very, very organized. B, I think he's, has a lot of charisma and, with these Zoom calls and staying on top of these guys. And I think that boils down to, what Greg Schiano is good at is being personable and being likable. He has his staff that by all accounts, is very likable, very approachable. I think he's taken advantage of it with these virtual visits and showing off campus, and I think they've done a good job with the videos of giving the recruits as much information as possible. I think Greg Schiano. It's going to be interesting to see what happens when recruits are actually able to get back to visiting campuses. Now Rutgers has improved their their facilities, of course, but they still have the bubble that is always going to be an issue until they actually fix it and until they can actually raise $150 million to build his dream palace. So at some point maybe the other Big Ten counterparts, these kids with like these really they can go anywhere. Maybe once they can go back to campus and visiting campus, maybe that becomes another weakness until Rutgers can fix it. But for now, over the last year, I think Greg Schiano has been able to take advantage of everything that he's been able to.
There's also going to be a lot of folks at Rutgers who are like, look at this recruiting class. Do we really need this dream palace?
Yeah, that's a great point.
No,
yeah.
For Greg Schiano to
yes, I know.
But like Crash said, for them to get to the next level, they're going to need to fix the bubble. The bubble is a big time issue.
Right. And when you see, there is a shock. And this is the first time I really had seen, the new facility that they, the Rotkin Center in its full glory. And it's just, again, this is the stuff that recruits look at. You hate to say it, it's superficial in a lot of ways, and they needed more space for all those programs. You don't have to go, you don't have to be in the rack in the health center to see how overcrowded some of those offices were to know how necessary that was. So yeah, I think if Rutgers donors think they're getting off the hook for that $100 million check to build that thing, they are very much mistaken. All right, let's dive into true false, guys. I only have a few ones here, but you know the rules. As always, I'll give you a topic and hit me back with what you think the answer is, and we'll discuss them all. True or false? The highlight of the Scarlet White game was Isaiah Washington's one-handed catch. Crash, true or false?
True.
Sarge, true or false?
True.
True or false? The highlight of the Scarlet White game was the salute to the healthcare professionals in the final play. I trapped you. I trapped you there.
Diabolical.
How you like that? Come on. I don't say this.
It was very nice.
It was very nice, and I do not like those gimmicks a lot of the times. I think they're overdone. But it was almost like you got to the end of the night. And we had kind of forgotten. Like I had just allowed myself, because you're at a game in the press box, you're talking about football, everything seems normal. You kind of forgot how they got here, and it was a great little gesture to send to the people who were most involved in that, the testing protocols, the stuff that we will be the high patent behind the scenes that we don't, we're not even sure. We'll never know all the things that happened behind the scenes to keep this team on the field last year. So I'm going to go true there. Trapped you.
I'm gonna be mean and say false. I was, that Isaiah Washington catch was even better. And the
guy didn't even score. The doctor didn't even score. I thought you were gonna say
exactly.
That. He was out of the 1 yard line. So was it Danny from the other podcast that was breaking down the Bruta film, like frame by frame, to show he stepped out of bounds. Like, come on. Can't do that. All right. True or false? The player who surprised you the most in the Scarlet White game was running back Jameer Wright Collins. Cratch, true or false?
False.
Sarge, true or false?
I'll say true.
True or false? The player who surprised you the most in the Scarlet White game was defensive end Aaron Lewis. Cratch, true or false?
False.
Oh boy. Okay. Sarge, true or false?
False.
False. All right. We'll have to come back to see who did surprise Cratch the most. True or false? If Noah Vedra goes down, the quarterback we're going to see the most is still Johnny Langan. Cratch, true or false?
False.
Sarge?
False.
All right. We'll come back to that. True or false? The lacrosse team got hosed. The refs clearly missed a couple of penalties in the final minutes against North Carolina. True or false, Cratch?
False.
Okay. True or false?
I think there's literally a penalty like every play on every movement. But I'm going to say false.
And I tweeted, someone asked me about it. I tweeted back like, nothing's a foul, but everything's a felony. I mean, honest to God. And I thought he got literally knocked down at one point with the ball. I guess that's not illegal. I thought it might be illegal, but can we start with lacrosse? I mean, overtime loss to the number one team in the country. A game they easily could have won. I think this felt a lot like the Rutgers basketball loss to Houston. Maybe not without the same lead, but still that feeling that you had the couple of chances late in that game, Cratch. And again, if I could fill a thimble with all I know about this sport, but I clearly got the sense that there were just a couple of those times they had the ball possession where they lost it, turned it over. Just a tough loss.
No, a brutal, crushing loss. I think look, when you're playing at that level, the margin of error is so small, so finite. It's definitely a major disappointment. You had a 2-goal lead, I think, twice in the final. In the fourth quarter, you had them on the ropes. I was a little this is going to show you we're not lacrosse experts. Sudden death seems quite harsh.
Yeah, it does.
For an overtime. And look, I am the biggest proponent in the world. I think the biggest mistake the NFL ever made, besides putting a team in Jacksonville, Florida, was to do away with sudden death overtime. I thought it was perfect. College overtime is horrible. This strange hybrid the NFL has is horrible. Just end the game in a tie or have sudden death. But anyway, no, I think what makes it even tougher potentially than the men's basketball loss to Houston is, while we don't know for sure, we expect that next year Rutgers, Hoops, Gio's going to be back, Ron's going to be back, you're going to have Cliff back, Mulcahy. This lacrosse team is a lot of veteran guys who came back for one more go-round, or a guy like Adam Sherrilambidi is like the last go-round. I think he's a seventh-year senior. So this is a program where they're not partly breaking up. Pretty much everyone is going to go their separate ways now, and it's going to be a totally different program. And we saw it took a long time for Rutgers to get to this point, and now they're going to have to start rebuilding. So I think that also adds to kind of the gravitas, the emotions of losing like that.
We did get a question from the Insider, Sarge, about the lacrosse recruiting. Why don't you take us through your thoughts on lacrosse recruiting coming up here? Come on,
so
you must
obviously, I have no feel on whether or not where their class stands. But I will say, we talked about this before, but the resources that some certain programs have at their disposal now with the Rodkin Center. They have a new practice facility, and they have beautiful locker room and offices. I mean, Brian Breck has not only has an NCAA tournament and a win to fall back on to point to. He has great resources. He has a great facility. So there's no reason why he shouldn't be able to recruit some players and be able to. And like Cratch pointed out last week, it's New Jersey. New Jersey, lacrosse in New Jersey is big. So I mean, he should be able to recruit the best players in the state.
You're a high academic, like an excellent academic institution in New Jersey that plays in the Big Ten, and you have state-of-the-art, top-of-the-line facilities and resources. This is a team that this should be the beginning of something, and 5 years, 10 years from now, they should be contending for Big Ten titles and national titles. There's no reason not to. There are a lot of sports at Rutgers where it's always going to be hard to win at, or you're always going to struggle, to recruit, and you really have to have the right coach and the right culture to do it.
Baseball and softball.
Volleyball, okay?
Yep, volleyball, definitely.
And I would even argue that baseball –
yeah, you're always going to lose the top players at the Southern schools. You're just,
You are. But I would say, lacrosse, there's lacrosse and field hockey and soccer. There's absolutely no reason why Rutgers should not be contending for the conference and an NCAA tournament every year.
The problem is, Cratch, you're competing against two New Jersey lacrosse powers in Princeton and Duke. Oh, see what I did there? Slip that in there. Little Duke joke. Sorry. All right. God, not even allowed. You're muted.
I like it.
I am muted.
I liked it. Right. I liked it.
It was it's legitimate.
I tried. Yeah.
It's just one of those things. There's a lot of good lacrosse players in this state, and they can't all go to Duke and Princeton.
All right. So, Kratch, who's the player who did surprise you the most in the game?
Oh, Victor Konopka.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a guy who when he signed with Rutgers, I thought to myself, is this a guy who got signed as a tight end, defensive end, and
Hey, Rutgers Rant listeners, it's Steve Politi from NJ Advanced Media. We appreciate you supporting this podcast and the sponsors who help us continue doing it. This week's podcast is brought to you by the New Brunswick Development Corporation. If you listen to this show, you love Rutgers. And if you love Rutgers, you know the positive impact that DevCo has made on the campus and its community. We thank the New Brunswick Development Corporation for its continued support and for helping make this podcast possible. Now back to the show.
a year from now, he's going to have put on 50 pounds and be an offensive tackle. And that hasn't happened with his size. He looked very fluid. He's a guy who's relatively new to football. He looked the part. He was the guy that really impressed me. I looked at him and I thought, hey, he might be able to be what I thought Travis Vokalek was going to become before he left.
A year or two away, you think, or is this kid going to play this year?
I think he'll play this year. I think he's probably maybe the number 2 tight end. I mean, look, I just at this point I would have him ahead of Matt Alaimo. I think we've seen what Matt Alaimo is going to be. He's a guy who's going to be on the field. He can contribute, but I think Konopka has the ability to be the best blocker of that group. And if he can make plays downfield, he's definitely your number 2 tight end, and he's potentially a star down the road.
All right, let's jump into the Rutgers Insider questions. As always, thank you for subscribing, NJ.com /insider to get our up-to-the-minute texts and also to participate in the conversation and set the agenda for the podcast. All right, the first one is another question. A lot of questions about the backup quarterback situation. In the race for backup QB, is either a better fit for Gleason's offense as a dual-threat runner? I think going into this game, we might have said no, Kratch, but I mean, watching the game, I think we might have an answer there.
Yeah, I thought Cole Snyder really impressed with the way he moved around. Simon ran well too. I think I thought there was a lot of daylight between Snyder and Simon. Maybe I'm wrong. I think Simon was obviously the more heralded recruit, and I still think there's a possibility that we kind of saw this with Art, that they have an internal opinion from practice and the film room and everything that is different from the little glimpses we see. But I thought Snyder definitely looked like the perfect guy to kind of run that offense. Not necessarily better than Vedral at this point, but I was very impressed by everything. He checked all the boxes for me.
Another quarterback question. It might be an obvious question, but is there any way a quarterback's arm strength can be improved? Now, Sarge, this was interesting. I actually asked Noah Vedral during one of our availabilities about his arm strength. I was just curious if it's something that he has had to work on during his career. It's become an object, obviously a topic of concern for Rutgers fans. I think we've seen some instances where it might be a concern. I mean, what was your takeaway from his answer? And do you think it is something at this stage of his career that can be improved?
So I'd have to go back and look at every one of his interceptions, but I think where he struggled was, for tight windows, not just, tight windows, he had trouble, finding the zip and sometimes, those would get picked off. But, the one play that is most vital to a quarterback, at both the college and the pro level is that 15-yard out, right? And he's able to execute that. Beyond that, the offense has to get more vertical. But he's been, I haven't seen anything where that was the reason why they didn't. I think the reason why they didn't go as vertical is because the offensive line. I think they were trying to mask a lot of the issues with the offensive line, with the way they ran the offense a year ago. So if they have better offensive line play, I think maybe they'll be able to open it up a little bit more. The one takeaway just from talking to him is just how, my spring camp, the 15 practices in spring camp helped Noah Vedral really get a feel for Sean Gleason's offense. I think by all accounts, everyone says that Noah Vedral, the son of a football coach, is a football junkie, has great football IQ. I think he really benefited from it. This was a kid who didn't arrive on campus until like 2 months before training camp, and really only had about 4 weeks to prepare for the season with the playbook. So I think he really took advantage of all the work this spring. And
what I liked about it, and this is something we haven't been able to see because we haven't been around the team, but he just carried himself like this is his football team. From the moment they walked out of the tunnel, during the warm-ups, on the sidelines, coaching the other quarterbacks, his answer about the other quarterbacks, clearly I'm trying to help them learn. Like this, I'm talking about Cratch. This is a confident kid. I mean, I can't even say kid. It's a confident adult guy who's convinced that this is his job, and he's gonna have a great year.
No doubt. I think you hit the nail on the head. We've never actually been in the same room with him. Hopefully that will happen at some point. But he definitely kind of had this air about him, like, this is his team, and it is. I mean, there is no doubt. It was a 97% chance. Now the Art's gone to Illinois. It's a 100% chance. He is the guy, and I think Rutgers needs him to be the guy because that's their best chance. That I think if you look at the ways their offense improves, obviously it's more playmakers step up, offensive line steps up. A big way for it is that Vedral does more to produce for them.
All right, here's a good one from K Fine, our friend out in Indiana. I'm wearing my scarlet-colored glasses, but Thursday I saw a team with a solid shot at 6 wins in the bowl this year. Why am I right, or am I wrong? We talked about this a little bit, guys. I kind of agree with them, and I don't know if they're going to get the 6 wins, but I think it would be important for them to be in the conversation. Like if we're in November and they've got 5, which certainly I think is possible, then at least it's interesting. The fans are engaged to see if they can pull it off.
Politi, I'm just worried about exit interviews. You're asking me about bowls, Politi. I mean, I'm just trying to just focus on the next day.
You and Allen Iverson on you. We're talking about bowl games, Sarge. It's May 23rd. We're talking about bowl games. It was great. I loved it. Good question, though.
Good question. Yeah. Good question.
Great question, Sarge. But
I gotta say this though, like, of course we're gonna ask that question.
Of course, it makes it fun. It just the reaction does. The look on his face was just priceless. I loved it.
Hey, at least he didn't do what Ash did. Oh yeah, we're gonna go to a bowl game. Whoops.
Right? Yeah, that's the opposite way of handling that. So to Kayvon's question, you assume they get the 3 non-conference. I mean, certainly it seems they'll be favored in all 3. Certainly, yes.
They'll be favored in all 3, but I was thinking about this. That game at Syracuse, it reminds me a lot of the Rutgers Boston College game in 2019, where Dino Babers. I'm not saying he's going to get fired if they lose to Rutgers, but it's hard to see how Dino Babers loses to Rutgers and then lasts for long term at Syracuse. Because I actually think that I know Syracuse. I don't know if his contract is completely confirmed, but it sounds like I think after this season he's like where Ash was. He's got 3 years left, so you either got to fire him or extend him. So going into Carrier Dome, in January, February, I thought Rutgers was going to crush Syracuse. Now I'm thinking that's going to be a tough ball game for them, and a critical one. Because the same thing, I can't see Rutgers going to a bowl game without beating Syracuse.
Right. So then, all right, if they just for the sake of K Fine's argument here, they get all 3, then you're kind of looking at getting 3 wins out of a 5-game Big Ten, 5 out of 5 Big Ten games. We're going to assume Northwestern's down, losing the quarterback. You're going to assume Illinois and our new coach is, up or down. That was a 1-possession game last time they played them. They beat Michigan State last time. I mean, there are opportunities to win games on the schedule.
You're throwing out the Ohio State game, Politi?
I get it. I'm going to throw out Ohio State, Indiana, and I might even throw out Michigan in the Big House. Although they could have won that game last year. So I don't know. It's possible.
Look, I mean, we're talking. I pick them to win go 6-6 in years where they actually go 2-10. So you're asking the wrong Pete reporter as far as whether or not they can go to a bowl game. But yes, I mean, I do think that they have a lot of. They have. Their entire offense back. And again, this was going to be something that, Graciano is always going to downplay, because I asked him at the very beginning of spring camp, what, was the significance of that. And as he said, he goes, well, it's one thing that they're all back, but, whether or not, that they were still a 3-6 team with all those guys. So they need to all make improvements. But, experience is never a bad thing, and and we saw that they did seem to take a leap during spring camp. So yeah, why not?
So 2 things I would say this: one, I'm already. I'll tip my hand a little bit. I think Michigan is going to potentially be the surprise team in the Big Ten this year. So I think the idea that Rutgers is just going to go.
We literally say that every year under Jim Harbaugh that they're going to be. This is the year.
Okay,
that Michigan,
but my point is this idea that Rutgers is just like going to stroll into the big house and beat Michigan because last year. I don't think that's necessarily going to carry over. The way I look at it is you got your 3 non-conference games. You have Illinois, Michigan State, Maryland, coin toss games. If you get all 3 of them, you're going to a bowl game. I think Northwestern is the tough one. It's on the road, but they're down. I think they returned the fewest starters than anyone in the Big Ten. Ohio State, I think Michigan is just a tough matchup for them. Indiana, Ohio State, that's not happening. The Penn State game could be big, but we saw there was still a big gap. And then Wisconsin, I eternally think that Wisconsin is more manageable than they look on paper just because of their style of play, although if Graham Mertz really kind of takes off, they could be more of a threat offensively.
All right, we got many, many, many months to break this down, so I'm sure we'll do it again soon and answer the same question. Here's a numbers basic question. Eager to hear who we think might enter the transfer portal. Obviously, Paul Woods has already entered it. Cratch, is that it? Do any players have to enter it? I thought Isaiah Washington was a candidate. Now he had look really good. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't really think so. Because I think if you look at the thing, the offensive line, you've got guys who are going to play, and then you've got a lot of young guys. Sort of the same thing with the defensive line. Linebacker, maybe there's a lot of guys there. Maybe 1 or 2 guys shakes loose, but I don't necessarily know that. You've got depth issues in the secondary. Wide receiver, you're seeing some attrition there. Tight end, running back room. I think those guys all have different roles. So I'm sure we might see 1 or 2 more guys into the portal, but I don't expect a mass exodus necessarily.
We're going to see some more guys, but it won't be defined as a mass exodus. I think it'll be guys like Paul Woods, guys who were once promising recruits who flashed at times, but really didn't really have the production. We go back to Greg Schiano's statement on the exit interviews. What are they talking about during the exit interviews? There's 110 guys on the 120 guys on the roster, so he's going to have to make decisions. We all know that the 2022 goes from 100 scholarships back down to 85 probably. So he's going to need to make some tough cap decisions. And that one thing that you need to caution fans on is even if you're going to see some a high number of kids, this is going to be every school in the country. There's going to be a lot of I wrote about it 2 months ago, and what we saw in basketball over the last couple of months, I think we're going to see in football. And I think we're going to see it probably in the next couple of months, post-spring practice. I think you're going to see, a lot of guys trying to, evaluate it and make a decision based on their future.
Right. And this might not, and these players who leave now probably are not guys that Greg Schiano is going to said he's losing. That's the key thing to remember. I don't think, Paul Woods, I think that's one of those conversations is, hey, let's go. Good luck to you, Paul. I think that's probably what's happening. We have some breaking news on the podcast, Cratch. I just see Cratch, you used the chat function here. What's going on?
Yes, so it looks like officially the Temple season opening game is being moved to Thursday.
Nice. September,
I believe, 2nd. No time or broadcast yet, but I guess that frees up people for their week. Labor Day weekend, excuse me. And we'll see what happens. My guess is I think that could be a really early kickoff potentially, because Ohio State, Minnesota is, I believe, in prime time that night. So would they want counter programming around the same time in New York and the Philly markets? So I don't know if that could be like a 5 p.m. kickoff potentially, 5 or 6 p.m.
Oh, exciting. Okay. I've changed my calendar. Now I've got plans for Thursday. Okay.
Excellent.
Good stuff. All right. A couple more questions and we'll sign off. So do we have another Tajra question if you're here? Do we have any sense of, where Rutgers is now with this class? Are there a couple of guys ready to pop, Cratch? Are we going to get any more news recruiting wise, or have we entered a part time in the calendar where it could be quiet?
I think it's relatively quiet. I think the big fish that's next up for them is a linebacker from New York City, Moses Walker. I think he's the guy they're targeting, a couple other guys. But I think it'll be relatively quiet because, for the first time in a long time, all these kids are going to get to go to campuses, go to camps and everything. So I think that might be kind of a lull period.
All right. This is a good question I want to address, and we could do an entire podcast on this. But one of the insiders asks, how will the name, image, likeness work for Rutgers? Rutgers is between Philadelphia and New York. Shouldn't that be a boon for Rutgers? So the question, obviously, if they pass the new rules about athletes being able to profit on their NIL rights, will that have an impact here? And I mean, it's sort of a fascinating thing. I don't think we believe that there are going to be scores of Rutgers athletes making buku bucks, but because of the New York market and where, New Jersey market, Philadelphia, in this area, is there a chance that a guy like Geo Baker or Noah Vedral could cash in? What do you guys think?
I actually think that being in this market is going to hurt from an NIL standpoint. Here's why. Not hurt, but it's here's the thing. If you are a star football player at Nebraska, you're the only show in town. So, yeah, you're going to get, car dealership commercials. But you come here, I mean, even Geo Baker with his stature is not going to get a car dealership commercial over the Giants' number 2 wide receiver. It's just not. This is how it works. But I do think NIL is gonna be a big boost for a lot of the Olympic sport athletes at Rutgers. We've talked about this in the past. Yamira Ali's, Gianna Glatz, John Poznansky, Sebastian Rivera. They can run camps with their name in the summer every day all across the state, and they can get kids in there and they can make money that way. Instagram, I think, is going to be huge. We've seen a lot like with gymnastic stars. That's one thing that I think people don't necessarily appreciate yet about NIL is a kid doesn't have to be the best player on the team or best player in the country to have 80,000 followers on TikTok and be doing, native ads.
This is a great question, Sarge. So let's pretend that we had some money in the bank and we could hire one Rutgers athlete to come on this podcast every week.
Sure.
Who's your gun to your head? Who's your choice? Who's the one that will make it worth our money to have on the podcast?
Wow. I mean, Geo Baker is obviously the logical one. He's very, well spoken. He doesn't, he answers all the questions, and he's a name. But got to go with the quarterback, right? I mean, you got to go with Noah Vedral. I mean, Eli Manning, Mike Francesa, isn't getting the, he's going to get the quarterback.
He's a very cautious interview, though. I mean, do you think that's gonna?
He's cautious. I don't know. I mean, I don't, like Crash said before, we have never actually been in a room with the kid. I have no idea what his personality is. I think he's actually pretty good on, on these Zoom calls, as far as, other Rutgers players, who we've talked to in the past year. I got to go with the quarterback.
Noah, welcome. How are you? All right. I would say Mike Tverdoff.
I was going to say Tverdoff. Damn it!
Oh, wow!
Yes,
good one.
Because for the reason that he'll tell some old stories. He'll get some old stories. Rutgers fans clearly love it when we tell. I mean, we'll get him going on Chris Ash and get him going on his brother's experiences. There's got to be some good stuff we can get out of him for a couple episodes. Yeah, Tverdoff, call your agent. Have your people call our people. As if, could you imagine what we'd offer him? Like, okay, big negotiations here. Well, we got a gift card to Chipotle. Is that enough? All right, one final question, and it's a topic that's been going around the internet today. Is it true the Seton Hall game is hanging by a thread? And if so, I mean, what the hell? Come on. Jerry Carino had an excellent story, as he always does. He's been the one most on top of this debate, Cratch. You had a theory on how to fix it.
Yes.
I just wonder if we've got a situation where you just got two stubborn sides and they're going to kill this thing because
I think there's a very good chance you've got that, because, look, I've said it. Seton Hall clearly ducked Rutgers last year. Like Jerry wrote, the idea that Seton Hall is going to argue force majeure. It's like, guys, you played a basketball game against Oregon in Omaha, Nebraska. Okay, so let's not act like the pandemic prevented you from playing at the Prudential Center. So that that's Rutgers. And in Rutgers' case, frankly, if Rutgers doesn't play Seton Hall, then they can go schedule. I don't know, Siena. They can or someone else, Caldwell College, come on down. That's our in-state.
That's great in theory, but what are of the Steve Pike era, the 5 biggest moments, 2 of them are Seton Hall wins.
Exactly, which is why I have a solution. Forget the lawyers. Forget calling Governor Murphy. This is the solution. It's very simple. Play the damn game twice this season.
Oh man, they'll never go for that though.
No, they won't. Of course they won't. But like, it would be all right. So the first game can be at the Prudential Center, sell it out, take the gate, and as a show of good faith from Rutgers, that the winner of that game gets the trophy. Then a week or two later, you go to the rack, you sell that place out again. You play. The only thing bigger than a Seton Hall Rutgers game would be the second one.
Yeah. That'd be great. There's no what'll happen there. They'll play the first game at the Prudential Center, and then Kevin Willard will say, "Yeah, we're looking for an open date for the next game on the schedule." And they'll never play.
Actually, you even better yet, like when you do like the Christmas break and the New Year's, like you play one game a week. Do it then. I would prefer it be early in the season, but just play the game twice. Right. You did it for years in the Big East, and it was the greatest thing ever. I mean, Jerry has got a laundry list worth of mayhem that he runs every year.
Right. The problem is Willard does not want to play. Willard doesn't want to play it once. That's the problem.
It's just like it's if this game is not played, it is a disgrace on both schools.
Absolutely.
They should be ashamed of themselves.
And the people and Governor Murphy, Richard Cody, the people who've got some pull in the state should get involved. Sarge, you know what happened.
Yes.
I mean,
correct.
we joke about this, but when it wasn't going to be played the first time around, I reached out to the governor's office and they said, maybe we'll have to get involved. And this was during, the height of COVID. Well, obviously they didn't get involved, but now they will be involved. If this thing gets to October and they're not playing, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, interesting thing that Jerry wrote was, the negotiations are at the AD level, and who's the AD for Rutgers is Pat Hobbs, who clearly, if there's one thing that we do know, he wants the game to be played. He has good relationships with the Seton Hall people by all accounts, and I somehow doubt that either coach. I really kind of think that both coaches would prefer not to play the game. I mean, I just. I don't think that, Do
you believe that, though, with Pikel? You really don't think he wants to play? You think he doesn't want to play that game?
Look, we go back to the Princeton thing. Why are they not playing Princeton? Because they're a pain in the ass.
Well, there's no value. There's no value in beating Princeton. At least there's value in beating Seton Hall. I mean, that's a good win still. Still a good win, but it's still a pain in the ass if they lose to them, and impacts them recruiting. And again, the one thing that Steve Pikel, he gets more than enough strength of schedule from the Big Ten. From the 20 games in the Big Ten. That's his belief. So the non-conference is basically preparing for Big Ten play. So if you take away that game, and Steve Pikel would the biggest the question, if you ever want to get under Steve Pikel's skin in November, December, is to ask him about the non-conference schedule, because he hates it. But that being said, as everyone knows, he's all too happy to schedule, as many of the low mid majors as possible, just to kind of pad it. And he believes that the non-conference is basically just a prep for the 20 games in Big Ten play,
which is fine. But I just come back to one, after everything the state has gone through, and I know basketball is not the most important. It just seems so piddly to me that the two biggest, these two strong college basketball programs can't figure this out. And the other thing, too, is from a financial standpoint, Rutgers is certainly hurting it. So is Seton Hall, I'm sure. What's going to make you more money and make more sense to kind of get money flowing again? Playing your in-state rival, or, like John Rothstein, Rutgers is going to play Merrimack. That's going to put fannies in the seats. That's come on. It just seems to be so ridiculous that it's college sports that if we can't get Rutgers Seton Hall played, then what are we doing?
Absolutely. And we're all salty on that one. I'll leave it there. Any final thoughts, fellas? Final thoughts before we log off, Cratch?
I mean, is this the last one that we do until training camp, or
training camp, pop in the middle of the summer just for the hell of it? I don't know.
Well, I mean, will you be working in the summer, or?
Why do you look at me and say that? I got the Olympics in the summer. I got a lot going on here. I'm going to take some vacation. I'm not going to lie to you. All right?
We should do a live vacation. We should do a live podcast prior to kickoff Thursday, September 2nd, in the parking lot of the Blue Lot.
You just hinted that the kickoff was going to be about breakfast time, though. We're going to be able to do that. What time do we have to get up to do that? The
9 a.m.
breakfast with the
kickoff.
rant. Won't be sitting there. Can you imagine the people? And they used to do the radio. They still do the radio show out there. They used to do the radio show out there.
They do, yeah.
The three of us sitting there. Holy crap! That was,
Fooch. No, my biggest takeaway is I left SHI Stadium after the spring game. I thought it was very telling that, obviously there's not a lot of mass. People were out and about. I think there's a confidence that we're going to be back at 100% capacity, and thank goodness that we're going to have a normal college football season. Knock on wood.
Knock on wood. Can't wait. We'll be there for every minute of it. For now, we'll sign off. James Kratz and Keith Sargent, Steve Politi signing off. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Rutgers Rant. To participate in the conversation and receive live updates about the Scarlet Knights directly to your phone, sign up at NJ.com/insider.
You haven't heard enough from me yet, huh? Steve Politi here for one last thank you to this episode's sponsor, New Brunswick Development Corporation, and to listeners like you who make it all the way to the end of the show. We'll see you again soon.